Ladies and gentlemen, let me start with a powerful truth. Being smart isn't about what you know. It's about what you choose not to share. We live in a world where oversharing is celebrated, where validation is public, opinions are loud, and silence is mistaken for weakness. But the smartest people, they move differently. They understand that wisdom isn't proven by speaking more. It's proven by knowing when to stay quiet. Today, we're going to talk about 3 things smart people never share, not because they're secretive, but because they're strategic. Because they think long term. Because they know that what you protect often determines how far you go. And by the end of this talk, you might not just listen differently. You might start living differently. Silence is a strategy, not a weakness. Most people think silence means uncertainty, fear, or lack of confidence. They assume that the loudest voice in the room is the strongest one. But strength has never been about volume. Strength is about control. Smart people understand this. They don't rush to fill every gap in a conversation. They don't feel uncomfortable when there's a pause, because silence gives them something most people give away too easily leverage. When you speak, you reveal what you know. When you stay silent, you learn what others don't mean to reveal. Silence creates space, and in that space, people talk. They explain themselves. They expose motivations, insecurities, and intentions. Smart people listen not just to words, but to patterns, tone, and timing. They understand that information is power, and the fastest way to lose power is to talk too much. We live in a culture that rewards instant reactions. Say something, post something, respond immediately. Silence is seen as weakness because it doesn't feed the ego. But smart people don't optimize for ego. They optimize for outcomes. They know that reacting is easy, but responding with intention requires discipline. Silence is what allows intention to form. Think about leaders you respect, the ones who make you feel safe, confident, and inspired. They're rarely the ones constantly explaining themselves. They speak when it matters. Their words carry weight because they're not diluted by noise. When someone speaks all the time, their words lose value. When someone speaks rarely but deliberately, people lean in. Silence is also a filter. It shows you who is patient and who is impulsive, who needs validation and who doesn't. Many people talk because they're uncomfortable with uncertainty. Silence forces them to confront that discomfort. Smart people are comfortable there. They don't need to prove they belong in the room. Their presence is enough. There's also courage in silence. It takes courage not to defend yourself immediately. It takes courage not to correct every misunderstanding. It takes courage to let results speak instead of arguments. Silence says, I don't need to convince you right now. That confidence unsettles people who rely on constant reassurance. In negotiations, silence is one of the most powerful tools. Say your piece, then stop. Let the other side feel the pressure to fill the gap. Most people do. They offer more information, more concessions, more clarity than they intended. Silence shifts control without aggression. It's influence without force. Emotionally, silence is protection. When emotions run high, words become weapons. Smart people don't give their emotions immediate access to their mouth. They pause. They let the feeling pass before choosing the response. Silence prevents regret. It preserves dignity. It keeps relationships intact. Silence also signals self-trust. When you trust yourself, you don't need to constantly seek agreement. You don't need applause after every thought. You don't measure your value by how often you're heard. Smart people measure value by impact, not attention. There's a difference between being quiet and being silent. Quiet can come from fear. Silence comes from awareness. Silence is intentional. It's chosen. It's used. And like any tool, it becomes more powerful with practice. The world will always reward noise in the short term, likes, reactions, attention. But long-term respect is built differently. It's built by people who know when to speak and when to hold back. People who understand that not every thought needs a voice, not every battle needs a response, and not every moment needs commentary. Silence gives you time. Time to think, time to observe, time to align your words with your values. And when you finally speak, people listen, not because you're loud, but because you're deliberate, because they've learned that when you break your silence, it matters. Oversharing kills authority because authority is built on trust, clarity, and restraint, not on constant disclosure. When people share too much too often, they blur the line between leadership and insecurity. Authority doesn't come from letting everyone see every thought, doubt, or emotion. It comes from showing that you can hold complexity without needing to unload it onto others. In a world where everyone is encouraged to share everything, restraint becomes rare. And rarity creates value. When someone speaks selectively, people pay attention. When someone explains everything, justifies every decision, and narrates every struggle, their words lose weight. Oversharing turns confidence into noise. It signals a need to be understood immediately, and authority never asks for immediate understanding. Leaders who overshare often believe they are being transparent. But transparency without boundaries becomes confusion. People don't need access to every internal debate to trust a decision. They need consistency. They need direction. They need to know that the person leading them has thought things through. Oversharing exposes the process when what people are looking for is the outcome. Authority is not about being relatable all the time. It's about being reliable. When you share every doubt publicly, you may feel honest, but you also transfer uncertainty to others. Smart people understand that their inner world is not always meant to be externalized. Some thoughts need time. Some emotions need privacy. Some ideas need protection. There's also a psychological cost to oversharing. When you constantly explain yourself, you train others to expect explanations. You weaken your own position. Instead of your decisions standing on their own merit, they begin to depend on how well you justify them. Authority shifts from what you do to how well you defend it. Oversharing often comes from a desire for validation, a need to be seen as good, fair, or misunderstood. But authority doesn't seek validation. It creates alignment. When people sense that someone needs approval, they subconsciously stop following and start evaluating. Leadership becomes a performance instead of a position of trust. In professional settings, oversharing personal struggles can also dilute respect. Vulnerability has power, but only when it's intentional and timed. When vulnerability becomes habitual, it stops being courageous and starts being careless. Smart people know the difference between meaningful vulnerability and emotional dumping. The same applies to sharing plans, ideas, and intentions. When you talk too much about what you're going to do, you create a false sense of progress. You invite opinions before execution. You allow doubt to enter before momentum is built. Authority grows when people see results, not when they hear promises repeated. Oversharing also removes mystery, and mystery is not manipulation. It's space. Space allows others to project confidence, competence, and leadership onto you. When everything is exposed, there's nothing left to discover. People stop leaning in. They stop wondering, and authority fades when curiosity disappears. Think about people you naturally respect. They don't tell you everything. They don't explain every choice. They don't react publicly to every challenge. They hold their ground quietly. Their words are measured. Their silence is intentional. That restraint creates stability, and stability creates trust. Authority also requires emotional regulation. When leaders overshare frustration, anger, or disappointment, they spread instability. Others begin to mirror that emotional state. Smart people process emotions privately so they can show up publicly with clarity. That doesn't mean suppressing feelings. It means choosing the right place and time for them. Oversharing can also blur roles. When leaders share too much with everyone, boundaries dissolve. Authority relies on clear roles and expectations. When those lines disappear, confusion replaces respect. People don't know whether to follow fix or comfort. In the end, authority is not taken, it's granted. And people grant authority to those who appear grounded, intentional, and secure. Oversharing does the opposite. It signals restlessness. It signals uncertainty. It signals a need to be heard rather than a readiness to lead. Smart people understand that not everything needs to be shared to be understood. That strength is quiet. That credibility grows in restraint. And that the less you explain, the more people trust that you know exactly what you're doing. Not everyone deserves access. And smart people understand this early. Access is not about secrecy or arrogance. It's about discernment. Your time, your energy, your thoughts, your plans, and your emotions are limited resources. When you give everyone unlimited access, you dilute their value and weaken your own position. Smart people don't confuse openness with availability. Most people assume that being inclusive means letting everyone in. But leadership, growth, and success often require boundaries. Boundaries are not walls meant to shut people out. They are filters that protect what matters. Smart people decide carefully who gets to hear their ideas, who gets to influence their decisions, and who gets to witness their process. Access creates influence. The closer someone is to your inner circle, the more power they have over your mindset. Their words can motivate you or discourage you. Their opinions can sharpen your thinking or create doubt. Smart people are intentional about who they allow into that space. They understand that not every opinion is equal and not every voice deserves the same weight. Sharing too much with the wrong people has consequences. Some people don't want to support your growth. They want to measure themselves against it. Others listen not to understand, but to compare, judge, or compete. Smart people recognize patterns. They notice who celebrates quietly and who questions loudly. They notice who protects their confidence and who slowly erodes it. Access is also about timing. Some people may deserve access later, but not now. When ideas are fragile, they need protection. Early exposure invites criticism before clarity. Smart people wait until their vision is strong enough to stand on its own before opening it to wider perspectives. They don't rush to share unfinished thoughts with people who lack patience or context. Emotionally, access must be earned. Not everyone needs to know what hurts you, what scares you, or what you're unsure about. Emotional oversharing can make you vulnerable to people who don't have the capacity to hold that information responsibly. Smart people choose safe places for vulnerability. They don't confuse sympathy with support. Access also defines respect. When you make yourself available to everyone at all times, people subconsciously value you less. Scarcity creates appreciation. This doesn't mean being distant or cold. It means being intentional. Smart people show up fully where it matters and pull back where it doesn't. There's also a difference between transparency and exposure. Transparency builds trust. Exposure invites misuse. Smart people know the difference. They share what's necessary, not everything that's possible. They understand that privacy is not dishonesty. It's self-respect. In professional environments, access to decision-making is power. When you allow everyone to influence your direction, you lose clarity. Smart people listen broadly but decide narrowly. They gather input, then close the door and think. This separation maintains authority and prevents chaos. Not everyone who smiles wants you to win. Not everyone who asks questions wants to help. Some people seek access to feel important. Others seek it to gather information. Smart people don't assume positive intent blindly. They observe behavior over time before granting deeper access. Access also affects focus. Every conversation, explanation, and update costs mental energy. Smart people protect their focus fiercely. They don't waste it on people who are not aligned with their goals or values. They understand that distraction often enters disguised as connection. Relationships deepen when access is mutual and earned. When one person gives everything and the other gives nothing, imbalance forms. Smart people look for reciprocity. They notice who listens as much as they talk, who shows up without being asked, who respects boundaries without pushing them. Saying no to access is often uncomfortable. It can feel rude, selfish, or unkind. But smart people know that clarity is kinder than confusion. By setting boundaries early, they avoid resentment later. They teach others how to treat them through what they allow. Access is a privilege, not a right. And the smartest people in the room understand that protecting access is not about pushing people away, but about preserving what allows them to show up strong, focused, and grounded in the spaces that truly matter. Opinions don't need validation, but many people lie as if they do. They share what they think not to express truth, but to receive approval, a nod like agreement. The moment an opinion depends on applause, it loses its strength. Smart people understand that having an opinion is not the same as needing it to be accepted. When you constantly seek validation for what you believe, you give others control over your confidence. Agreement becomes permission. Disagreement feels like rejection. Smart people separate their sense of self from the reactions of others. They don't collapse when challenged, and they don't inflate when praised. Their opinions stand on reasoning, not response. Validation seeking often disguises itself as confidence. Loud declarations, repeated explanations, constant defenses. But true confidence is quiet. It doesn't argue unnecessarily. It doesn't chase agreement. Smart people know that if an opinion is solid, it doesn't need to be sold aggressively. Not every opinion needs to be shared, and not every shared opinion needs to be defended. When you feel compelled to explain yourself to everyone, you signal uncertainty. Authority grows when you're comfortable letting others disagree. Smart people don't fear disagreement because their identity is not attached to being right all the time. Social media has amplified the need for validation. Opinions are posted, measured, ranked. The more reactions, the more value we assign. Smart people resist this trap. They understand that popularity is not truth and silence is not defeat. An opinion can be valid even if it's unpopular or unseen. Seeking validation also weakens decision-making. When you crowdsource every belief, you dilute clarity. Too many voices create hesitation. Smart people listen to feedback, but they don't outsource conviction. They gather information, then decide internally. Their opinions evolve through thought, not pressure. There is also emotional maturity in holding an opinion without needing to announce it. Some beliefs are personal. Some are situational. Some are still forming. Smart people allow their thoughts to mature privately. They don't rush to declare positions just to be part of the noise. Validation can also trap you in consistency. Once you've publicly defended an opinion, ego resists change. Smart people leave room to grow. They don't tie their identity to past statements. By not seeking validation, they stay flexible. They can change their mind without feeling exposed. When you stop seeking validation, conversations change. You listen more. You speak less. You choose words carefully. You don't interrupt to be understood. You don't escalate to win. Smart people value understanding over being validated. This doesn't mean ignoring others or dismissing feedback. It means filtering it. Smart people distinguish between critique and noise. They consider insights without absorbing insecurity. They know the difference between someone questioning an idea and someone questioning their worth. Opinions that need validation often become performative. They are shaped to be liked rather than to be true. Smart people resist shaping their beliefs for comfort. They are willing to hold views that are misunderstood as long as they are thoughtfully formed. There's also freedom in not needing validation. Freedom from defending yourself constantly. Freedom from explaining your perspective to people who aren't listening. Freedom from adjusting your voice to fit the room. Smart people conserve energy by not fighting battles that don't matter. When